The air in the mess hall at Forward Operating Base Phoenix was a thick slurry of smells. Yesterday's fried fish, today's overboiled beef, and the sharp, ammoniac bite of industrial floor cleaner. It was a smell of institutional survival, not comfort. Staff Sergeant Anna Kovac moved through the line with the quiet economy of motion that defined her existence here. Tray, plate, scoop of rice, slab of gray meat. She kept her eyes down, not out of deference, but focus. The scuffed linoleum, the wear patterns on the serving spoons, the low, anxious hum of the generators. They were all data points. "Watch it, Sergeant." The voice was young, laced with the unearned confidence of a man who had never been truly tested. Specialist Davies, a thick-necked infantryman from Bravo Company, deliberately jostled her arm. A few drops of greasy gravy slopped onto her tray. Davies smirked, looking over his shoulder for approval from his fire team and, more importantly, from Lieutenant Miller, his platoon leader, who stood nearby. Miller, barely old enough to shave but already fluent in the language of casual contempt, offered a thin smile. He was a perfect mimic of the new base commander, Colonel Madsen, a man who mistook volume for authority and swagger for competence. Anna said nothing. She dabbed the spill with a napkin, her expression unreadable. This was the currency of the FOB under Madsen's command. Small, constant assertions of dominance, a pecking order enforced not by rank or skill, but by proximity to the loudest voice in the room. She was a supply sergeant. Pog. In their world, she existed in the background, a functionary who counted widgets and processed paperwork. It was a role she cultivated. Anonymity was its own form of camouflage. She found an empty table in the corner, positioning herself with her back to the wall, a habit ingrained so deep it was no longer a conscious thought. From here, she could observe the entire room. She watched Colonel Madsen holding court at the command table, his voice a booming monotone that drowned out all other conversation. He was laughing at his own joke, a loud, barking sound that made the junior officers around him bray in sync. His posture was a caricature of command, chest puffed, jaw set, but his eyes darted constantly, scanning for validation. He was a man performing a role, and the performance was all that mattered. Her gaze drifted to Master Sergeant Reyes, the senior logistics NCO, sitting alone a few tables away. Reyes was old school, a man who had seen commands come and go like seasons. He wasn't looking at the colonel. He was looking at her, a flicker of something, curiosity, perhaps recognition, in his tired eyes before he returned to his meal. Reyes was one of the few who didn't deal in noise. He dealt in results, and he'd noticed that Anna's supply requests were never late. Her inventories were never wrong, and her section ran with a silent efficiency that was almost unnatural. A sudden flicker of the overhead fluorescent lights drew her attention. They dimmed for a full second, then buzzed back to their sickly yellow-green intensity. The generator. She had filed a maintenance request 2 weeks ago about the primary generator's fuel injector assembly showing signs of particulate wear, predicting a cascade failure within the month if it wasn't stripped and cleaned. The request had been kicked back by Madsen's new XO with a note scrawled in red ink. Prioritize combat readiness metrics, not hypothetical maintenance to them. Readiness meant shiny rifles and PowerPoint slides showing high patrol numbers, not the unglamorous guts of the base that kept it alive. The hum of the generator was a clock, ticking down. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm of managed decay. The command climate, poisoned from the top, seeped into every corner of the FOB. Madsen's daily briefings were exercises in public humiliation. He would project patrol statistics on a large screen and berate platoon leaders whose numbers were down, never once asking about the context of vehicle maintenance, personnel fatigue, or actionable intelligence. One morning, he tore into a young captain from Charlie Company. "Captain, your readiness status is 78%. 78. That is unacceptable. It's a failing grade. What do you have to say for yourself?" The captain, face pale but voice steady, tried to explain. "Sir, 3 of my vehicles are deadlined. We've been waiting on replacement transmission couplings for a month. The request is stuck at the S4 inch. Anna, standing in the back of the tent, knew exactly which request he meant. It was sitting on her desk, flagged and escalated, waiting for the colonel's signature to prioritize the shipment. Madsen waved a dismissive hand. Excuses are the currency of failure, Captain. I don't want to hear about your supply problems. I want to see solutions. Find a way to get it done. The message was clear. Lie. The captain's readiness numbers were miraculously at 92% the next day. The broken vehicles were still broken, but the slide was green. The colonel was pleased. The base grew weaker, one pencil-whipped report at a time. Anna continued her work. She walked the perimeter every morning before her shift, a thermos of coffee in hand. She wasn't looking at the view. She was checking the concertina wire, noting the sections on the western fence line that were sagging, the strands rusted through from a winter of neglect. She observed the camera placements, identifying the blind spot near Tower 4, a perfect dead zone for an infiltration team. She logged it all in a quiet, personal report that she knew would go nowhere but would serve as her own situational awareness. She controlled what she could control. Her small corner of the world, the warehouse where order and logic still reigned. The confrontation, when it came, was inevitable. It started, as it so often did, over nothing. Davies and his squad had submitted a falsified checklist for their vehicle's medical kit, claiming it was fully stocked. A routine spot check by one of Anna's junior soldiers revealed it was missing 2 tourniquets, a chest seal, and all of its morphine. Protocol required her to file a report. It was a simple matter of safety and accountability. To Davies, it was a personal insult. He found her in the DFAC again during the evening meal. This time, he wasn't posturing for a small audience. He was angry, his face flushed, and he brought Lieutenant Miller with him for top cover. "Kovac!" he barked, blocking her path as she went to put her tray away. She stopped, her body relaxed, her gaze calm. "Specialist, you wrote up my vehicle. You dropped a dime on me for a couple of missing bandages. I reported that a mission-critical medical kit was incomplete." She corrected him, her voice even and low. "It's a readiness issue. Your readiness." Lieutenant Miller stepped forward, a smug look on his face. "Now, Sergeant, I think Specialist Davies feels this could have been handled with some professional courtesy. A quiet word, perhaps, instead of paperwork that makes my platoon look bad. Paperwork saves lives, sir. It ensures the next man who uses that vehicle doesn't bleed out because someone took a shortcut." Her reply was respectful in tone but unyielding in substance. She wasn't playing their game. Davies's face darkened. He was used to deference from those he considered beneath him. The quiet supply sergeant wasn't acting the way she was supposed to. He stepped closer, invading her personal space, his voice dropping to a growl. "You need to learn your place. You're a clerk. Stay in your lane." Anna didn't move, didn't even blink. Her stillness seemed to infuriate him more. It was the stillness of a rock in a stream, forcing the water to move around it. He saw it as weakness, as fear. He was wrong. "Just back off, Davies," she said. The words a quiet command, not a plea. That was the final trigger. For Davies, for Miller, for the whole rotten culture of the FOB, a woman, a POG, giving an order to a combat arms soldier was an inversion of the natural order. Davies felt a surge of righteous fury, egged on by his lieutenant's silent smirk. "You don't tell me what to do," he snarled, and he shoved her hard. It was a clumsy, telegraphed move. Anna's center of gravity was low, her feet perfectly balanced. She absorbed the impact without moving a single step. The surprise on Davies's face was almost comical. He had expected her to stumble, to fall. Her immovability was an accusation. He threw the punch, a wild, looping right hook born of ego and rage. The world seemed to slow down for Anna. She saw the shift in his shoulders, the clench of his jaw, the slight widening of his eyes as he committed to the motion. Her response was not an act of aggression, but of simple, brutal physics. She didn't dodge. She flowed. A slight pivot of her hips, a turn of her shoulder. His fist, aimed for her jaw, slid past her ear, his momentum carrying him forward and off balance. In the same fluid motion, Her left hand came up, not to block, but to guide, her fingers brushing his forearm to subtly alter his trajectory. Her right hand, open-palmed, moved a mere 6 inches. It connected with his solar plexus. It wasn't a punch. It was a precise application of force, a palm-heel strike delivered with the full, focused weight of her body. The impact was almost silent, a dull thud. All the air left Specialist Davies's lungs in a single, explosive gasp. His eyes bulged, the swagger, the anger, the confidence. It all vanished, replaced by a primal, desperate need for oxygen. He folded in on himself, clutching his stomach, and dropped to his knees, his breath coming in ragged, wheezing sobs. The entire exchange had taken less than 2 seconds. Silence fell over the immediate area. Lieutenant Miller stared, his mouth agape. Across the room, Master Sergeant Reyes slowly put down his fork, his eyes wide with a new, profound understanding. He had just seen something he couldn't explain. It wasn't a fight. It was a disassembly. Before anyone could process what had happened, a sound tore through the evening air, a sound that overrode everything. It was a high, whistling shriek, growing louder by the millisecond. The first mortar round landed 50 meters outside the DFAC, the explosion a deafening crump that shook the building to its foundations. The lights didn't just flicker this time. They died. The room was plunged into absolute darkness, and in that blackness, the collective scream of 200 soldiers began. The emergency lights flickered on a moment later, casting the room in a hellish red glow. Chaos erupted. Soldiers, driven by instinct, scrambled for cover, trampling each other in the dark. Another mortar hit, this one closer. The windows on the north wall imploded, spraying a cloud of shattered glass across the tables. While others panicked, Anna moved. The adrenaline spike was familiar, a cold, clarifying hum in her veins. The noise, the fear, the confusion, it all faded into the background, replaced by a razor-sharp focus. Her mind became a triage flowchart. Threat, casualty, cover, action. Her first action was to turn back to the man who had just tried to assault her. Davies was still on his knees, now paralyzed by terror, hyperventilating. She grabbed the back of his body armor and hauled him under the relative safety of a heavy steel table. "Breathe, Specialist," she commanded, her voice cutting through the din slowly. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. Do it now." He stared at her, his eyes wide with shock and fear, but he obeyed. She scanned the room, her eyes adjusting to the dim, bloody light. She saw movement, color, injury. A soldier near the shattered windows was screaming, a dark stain spreading rapidly across his thigh. A shard of glass had opened his femoral artery. Anna was already moving toward him. She ripped a long strip from a tablecloth, her hands working with an ingrained muscle memory efficiency. She knelt by the screaming soldier, her voice calm and authoritative. "Look at me. What's your name?" "Jones," he stammered, his eyes wild with pain. "Okay, Jones. This is going to hurt." She positioned the cloth strip high on his thigh, wrapped it twice, and used a discarded butter knife as a windlass, twisting until the fabric bit deep into his flesh and the bright red arterial spray slowed to a dark ooze. He howled in agony. "Stay with me, Jones," she said, her eyes locked on his. She was already scanning for the next priority. Lieutenant Miller was frozen, standing in the middle of the floor as people scrambled past him. He looked like a child lost in a nightmare. "Lieutenant!" Anna's voice was a physical slap. He flinched, his head snapping toward her. "Get people under the tables. Now, move!" For the first time in his short career, Miller was given an order he didn't question. He saw the absolute certainty in her eyes, and it was an anchor in the storm. He started shouting, his voice cracking but functional, directing the panicked soldiers to take cover. The distant, rhythmic thumping of mortars was now joined by a new sound, a sharp, angry crackle from the west. Small arms fire. Anna's blood ran cold. The blind spot, she thought. Tower 4. This wasn't a random barrage. It was a coordinated, complex attack. They were using the mortars to fix everyone in place while an assault element breached the wire. She secured the makeshift tourniquet on Jones's leg, then moved to the next casualty, and the next, her movements a blur of practiced field medicine. She used belts, strips of uniform, anything she could find to stop the bleeding. She directed other, less panicked soldiers to help, her instructions simple and direct. You hold pressure here. Don't let go. You find me more cloth. You check if he's breathing. They obeyed without question. In the face of utter chaos, her calm was a force of nature. She found a security NCO lying near the entrance, his radio still clipped to his vest, a single, neat hole in his helmet. He was gone. Anna gently unclipped the radio, checked the battery, and switched it to the command frequency. The net was a disaster. Multiple impacts, I say again, multiple impacts on the LSA. We need QRF. Is anyone talking to Tower 4? I've got no contact. This is Dragon 6. Colonel Madsen's voice bellowed, strained and cracking with panic. All units, report. Someone give me a goddamn sitrep. The crosstalk was a tangled mess of fear and confusion. No one had a clear picture of the battle. Madsen was just yelling into the void, adding to the noise instead of cutting through it. He was a conductor who had lost his orchestra. Anna pressed the transmit button. Her voice was the opposite of Madsen's, low, steady, and devoid of emotion. All stations. This is an unknown call sign with an emergency report. Break, break. The frantic chatter paused for a heartbeat. The sheer discipline in her transmission was enough to command attention. Be advised, DFAC is compromised. Multiple casualties. Triage in progress. Main attack is a coordinated ground assault on the western perimeter, vicinity of grid 355 to 891. Recommend shifting indirect fire to suppress that grid and dispatching QRF to the breach point, not the LSA. The LSA is the secondary target. The breach is the primary. How copy? Over. Silence. Then, the TOC's battle captain, a major named Pierce, came on the air. Unknown station. Say again your grid. Anna repeated the coordinates she had memorized from her morning walks. Grid 355 to 891. It's a blind spot in your camera coverage. They are in the wire. Over. In the TOC, Major Pierce stared at the map. The grid reference was precise. It corresponded exactly to a dead zone they all knew about but had never prioritized fixing. Colonel Madsen was still staring at the blinking icons showing mortar impacts around the main living area. Who the hell is that? Madsen demanded, his face slick with sweat. I don't know, sir, Pierce said, already directing the FDC. But they sound like they do. Fire Direction Center, this is Dragon 3 Alpha. Fire mission, danger close. Grid 355-891. Anna didn't wait for a reply. She had fed the information into the system. Now she had to deal with the immediate reality. She looked at the handful of able-bodied soldiers huddled around her, including a pale and shaken Lieutenant Miller. We need to secure this building, she stated, not as a suggestion, but as a fact. The enemy knows we're softest here. They might send a team to finish the job. She looked at Miller. Lieutenant, get a head count. Anyone who can still fight. I need 2 men on that main entrance, and 2 on the kitchen exit. Use the tables for cover. We hold here until QRF arrives. Miller, who hours earlier had smirked at her being put in her place, now just nodded, his eyes wide with a terrifying new respect. Yes, Sergeant, the word felt different in his mouth now. It wasn't a placeholder for a rank. It was a title he finally understood. She found a rifle on another fallen guard. An M4. She checked the chamber, felt the weight of the magazine. It was familiar, comfortable. She slung it over her shoulder and began organizing a casualty collection point in the relative safety of the kitchen. Her movements fluid and purposeful. The supply clerk was gone. The soldier remained. Outside, the first illumination rounds popped high overhead, bathing the compound in a ghostly white light. The crackle of gunfire from the west was growing louder, angrier. The fight for FOB Phoenix had just begun, and its fate was resting, in no small part, on a woman no one knew. With a makeshift aid station established in the kitchen, Anna turned her attention to the larger fight. The small team Miller had assembled was holding the entrances, their fear held at bay by the simple, clear tasks she had given them. But the sounds from the perimeter were getting worse. The steady rhythm of friendly fire was being answered by the angrier, higher-pitched reports of enemy AKs, and they were getting closer. The command net was still a mess, but with a new element. Major Pierce was trying to manage the battle, his voice a strained island of calm in a sea of panicked reports. The QRF had been dispatched, but to the wrong place, sent toward the initial mortar impacts by Madsen before Anna's transmission had been understood. They were now fighting their way across open ground to get to the real breach. Anna knew they wouldn't make it in time. She had to relieve the pressure. "Miller," she said, her voice low as she knelt beside him at the main entrance. "I'm going out. Keep this position locked down. Radio me if you see anything, or if this building is breached. Use channel for inch." Miller stared at her as if she were insane. "Out? Out where?" "Sergeant, that's suicide. The fire team at Tower 4 is about to be overrun," she said, her eyes already scanning the terrain outside, processing angles and distances. "If they fall, the enemy owns that entire sector. They'll roll up the whole perimeter. We can't let that happen." She didn't wait for his permission. She checked her weapon again, took 3 spare magazines from a fallen guard's rig, and slipped out a side door into the flickering, smoke-filled night. The world outside the DFAC was a cinematic nightmare. Strobing emergency lights, the ethereal glow of the illumination rounds, the tracers of machine gun fire stitching green and red lines through the darkness. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and dust. Anna moved like a wraith. She didn't run. She flowed from one piece of cover to the next. A concrete barrier, a parked vehicle, a shallow ditch. Her movements were economical, her silhouette kept low. The years of training, the muscle memory from a dozen other nights just like this one, took over completely. She wasn't thinking. She was reacting, her body and mind a single synchronized weapon. She reached the last covered position before the western perimeter berm. The fire team from Tower 4 was pinned down behind a line of sandbags. Their position was failing. She could hear the snap of incoming rounds striking the sandbags just inches above their heads. Their return fire was sporadic, panicked. She saw the problem immediately. The enemy wasn't just in front of them. They had a machine gun nest set up in the dead ground she'd identified weeks ago, catching the fire team in a devastating crossfire. The team's sergeant lay motionless beside the position. They were leaderless, terrified, and about to be annihilated. Anna took a knee, steadied her breathing. In hold out, the world narrowed to her front sight post. She identified the muzzle flash of the enemy machine gun, calculated the range, 200 meters, adjusted for the slight crosswind. She fired. 2 rounds, a controlled pair. Pop, pop. She didn't wait to see the result. She was already moving, sprinting 10 meters to a new position before the enemy could fix on her location. From her new vantage point, she saw the machine gun was silent. She'd either hit the gunner or suppressed him. It was enough. She got on the radio, switching to the frequency for Bravo Company. "Bravo 42, this is Kilo 49er. I am at your 6 o'clock. Talk to me." A young, terrified voice came back. "We're pinned down. Sergeant's hit. We're taking fire from the west and northwest." "I see it," Anna said, her voice a pool of calm. "Listen to me. I'm going to suppress the western position. I need you to put all your fire on the northwest element as soon as I open up. Can you do that?" "Who is this?" the voice asked, trembling. "That doesn't matter right now, son. Can you do it?" A pause, then a shaky, "Yes. Stand by." Anna crawled to the edge of the berm, the M4 feeling light and familiar in her hands. She took a deep breath and then did something incredibly dangerous and incredibly effective. She rose from cover just high enough to present a target, and she opened fire, sending a controlled, 3-round burst toward the enemy position to the west. It was a calculated risk. The enemy, seeing a new threat, would instinctively shift their fire to her. And they did. The air around her exploded with sound as rounds ripped past her head. But for those 3 critical seconds, the pressure was off the pinned-down fire team. As she had commanded, the team erupted in a volley of sustained fire toward the northwest position. The sudden, concentrated volume of rounds caught that enemy element by surprise, forcing them to take cover. The battlefield geometry had changed. Anna had single-handedly broken the crossfire. Now it was a fair fight. She got back on the radio. Dragon 3 Alpha, this is Kilo 49er. Requesting immediate indirect fire. My position is friendly grid 354 to 890. Target is enemy concentration. Grid 352 to 892. Danger close. Break. Firing solution is high angle to clear the western berm. Splash in 30 seconds. Over. In the TOC, Major Pierce stared at the comms operator. Did she just call for her own fire mission? And correct the firing angle. He had colonels who couldn't do that under pressure. FDC, you heard her. Fire for effect. Anna yelled into the local radio. Bravo 4-2. Get your heads down. Splash in 20. She flattened herself against the earth, wrapping her arms around her head. 30 seconds later, the sky ripped open. The mortar rounds landed with a series of devastating, ground-shaking crumps exactly where she had directed them. The enemy assault element caught in the open was shattered. The incoming fire slackened, then stopped. The attack was broken. A few minutes later, the QRF's heavy vehicles rumbled up, their machine guns suppressing the few remaining enemy fighters as they fled back through the wire. The battle for the western perimeter was over. A captain from the QRF, his face smudged with dirt, found Anna kneeling beside the wounded from the fire team, applying a proper field dressing. The young soldier she had spoken to on the radio was staring at her with something akin to religious awe. The captain keyed his radio. TOC, this is Raptor Lead. We've secured the breach. We've linked up with someone here. The situation is under control. She routed them. He looked at Anna, at the supply sergeant patch on her arm, and then back at the carnage. Nothing made sense. Back in the TOC, the adrenaline was beginning to subside, replaced by a stunned silence. They had almost lost the FOB. They had been saved by a ghost, a mysterious voice on the radio who had seen the attack before it happened, diagnosed the enemy's plan, and surgically dismantled it. Find out who Kilo 49er is. Major Pierce ordered the S1 clerk. Right now. The comms sergeant triangulated the signal from the radio Anna had used. Sir, the transmission originated from a security radio assigned to the DFAC detail. I'm cross-referencing the personnel roster for that area. A list of names appeared on the screen. Cooks, guards, medics, and one logistics NCO, Staff Sergeant Anna Kovac. Pierce frowned. Kovac? The quiet one from S4? No, that can't be right. He looked at Master Sergeant Reyes, who had come into the TOC to help coordinate resupply and had been listening quietly. Reyes met his gaze and gave a slow, deliberate nod. Pull up her full file, Pierce commanded the clerk. I want to see everything. Use my credentials. The clerk's fingers flew across the keyboard. He typed in the major security overrides. The screen flickered, and then Staff Sergeant Kovac's official record appeared. It was a monument of black ink. Most of the file was redacted, huge blocks of text obscured by classified markers. But what was visible was enough to suck the air out of the room. Schools: Airborne School, Ranger School, SEER-C, Special Forces Qualification Course, 18X Pipeline Washout due to injury? No. Reclass to 18C MOST, then redacted. Below that, a list of deployments all to classified locations with Joint Special Operations Task Forces. Her awards listed a Bronze Star with Valor, an Army Commendation Medal with Valor, and a Silver Star. The citation for the Silver Star was a single, chilling sentence. Citation details classified under Title 50. At the bottom of the screen, under a section for call signs, was a single word, Valkyrie. The clerk leaned back from his screen as if it were radioactive. He looked at the major, then at Colonel Madsen, who had been hovering nearby, trying to reassert his authority now that the crisis was over. Major Pierce turned the monitor so the colonel could see it. "Colonel," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "this is your supply sergeant." Madsen stared at the screen. The blood drained from his face. He looked at the name, the schools, the awards. He saw the word Valkyrie. He remembered the stories. The rumors whispered by operators passing through Bagram about a female enabler. A CST who had fought her way out of an ambush in the mountains, calling in airstrikes on her own position. They called her Valkyrie. He had dismissed them as campfire tales. His mind flashed back to the mess hall, to the arrogant smirk of his lieutenant, the thuggish aggression of his specialist. He remembered his own dismissive attitude, his focus on meaningless metrics while a true warrior was quietly counting inventory in his warehouse. The shame was a physical blow, more potent than any punch. The quiet aftermath of the battle was more surreal than the fight itself. The sun was rising, casting long shadows across the compound. Medics were tending to the wounded. Engineers were already patching the breach in the wire. The FOB was alive, wounded but alive. Anna had made her way back to her warehouse. She said nothing to anyone, just retrieved a cleaning kit and the rifle she had taken. She sat on a wooden crate under the hum of a single, bare light bulb and began to methodically strip the weapon. She worked with a practiced, reverent grace, each movement precise and economical. The scent of solvent and gun oil filled the quiet space. It was a ritual, a way of returning to herself, of washing away the violence with methodical care. She heard footsteps and looked up. Colonel Madsen stood in the doorway, his uniform disheveled, his face etched with exhaustion and a profound, gut-wrenching humility. He looked like a man who had just seen his own reflection for the first time and been horrified by it. He stood there for a long moment, struggling to find words. "Sergeant Kovac," he finally managed, his voice hoarse. She didn't stop her work, her hands moving over the bolt carrier group.
"Colonel."
I saw your file." She paused, wiping a clean patch down the barrel. "Yes, sir." "Why?" he asked, the question hanging in the air. "Why are you here, packing boxes?" She finally stopped and looked at him, her eyes clear and steady. There was no anger in them, no triumph. Only a deep, abiding weariness. "I got tired of the noise, sir," she said. "I wanted to do a job where the numbers were real. An item is either on the shelf or it isn't. It's accounted for or it's not. It's a quiet, honest kind of work." Her words were a devastating indictment of his entire command philosophy. He had no response. The bluster and the slogans were useless here, in the face of this quiet, unbreakable competence. "What you did out there," he started, then trailed off. "Thank you. I was just doing my job, sir. Keeping our equipment and our people accounted for," she replied, the double meaning hanging in the air. Madsen just nodded, a broken man. He turned and walked away, the sound of his boots echoing in the vast, quiet warehouse. Anna finished cleaning the rifle. Every piece was wiped down, lightly oiled, and reassembled with the flawless precision of a watchmaker. She performed a functions check, the clicks of the trigger and safety selector sharp and clean in the silence. She carried the weapon to the arms room, logged it back into the rack, and initialed the checkout form. Then she returned to her desk, picked up a tablet, and began the slow, tedious process of updating the inventory of medical supplies expended during the attack. Bandages, tourniquets, liters of saline. Her face was illuminated by the cold, blue glow of the screen. Her expression was calm, focused. The storm had passed. Her work remained. A shadow fell over her desk. She looked up to see Master Sergeant Reyes standing there, holding 2 steaming mugs. He didn't say a word. He just placed one of the mugs on the corner of her desk. It was black coffee, just the way she liked it. She looked from the mug to his face. His eyes, for the first time, held no questions. Only a deep, quiet, and profound respect. He gave her a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement of the truth he had finally witnessed. Anna picked up the mug, the warmth seeping into her hands. She took a sip. Outside, the first rays of the rising sun touched the repaired concertina wire, making it gleam like a string of diamonds. The generators hummed their steady, repaired rhythm. The bass was quiet. The work was done. For now.